Hi everyone, welcome back to No Comment Podcast and episode 2 of the Watts Family Murders series. In the previous episode, we looked at the start of NK and Watts' crazy love affair, and I shared my theory around how they first met. In today's episode, we will rip apart and scrutinize the hot mess that was NK and Watts' affair. So in the last episode, I shared with you my theory on how NK knew to Google Chris and Shanann 9 months before she met Chris at work. Now, reading through the discovery again, I noticed that she talks more about her job role, Anadarko, and says that she manages the gas monitor sensors at work, and she also confirmed that she had seen Chris before. Now, she could just mean like a month or so before their affair started, or she could be talking longer. There's no time frame added, so we don't know. The detail about her job role does lend further weight to my theory on how they met before she started at Anadarko in April 2018. Quick recap, I think it may have been to do with the explosion in 2017 in Firestone, which was caused by a severed gas line. So before I jump into the timeline, I want to clarify a few points about my thinking when it comes to NK and her level of knowledge about the Watts family situation. 1. She 100% knew Shanann was pregnant throughout the duration of their affair. During her interviews with FBI, NK plays the fool and tells them she only found out Shanann was pregnant through the media after she was reported as missing. I don't believe this for a second. Shanann, being the Facebook fanatic, she posted early doors about her pregnancy before her first ultrasound, which is generally quite unheard of, because of course the first trimester is the riskiest in terms of whether a pregnancy is healthy. NK, being the queen of looking shit up on the internet, would have Googled Shanann and would have seen the pregnancy reveal and subsequent posts about the ultrasound and photos of her growing tummy. 2. She 100% knew Chris and Shanann were not separated from day one. Again, she would have seen the photos all over Facebook before Shanann flew to North Carolina of her and Chris looking happy and in love. Also, and as we'll discuss in a second, there was an occasion early on when Shanann called and texted Chris with no response, surprise, surprise, and she was pissed. Chris had to rush home away from NK's flat. Would a bloke who was separated from his wife, preparing for a divorce, run to his soon-to-be ex's beck and call like that? No, I don't think so. What I'm not 100% on is whether Chris knew NK knew this, or whether she played the dum-dum card with him too. Big Friends reference jumping out at me there, guys. They don't know we know, they know we know. Okay, now that's all cleared up, let's return to our timeline. It's June 27th. Shanann has just left to spend the summer in North Carolina with her parents and in-laws, whilst Mr. Watts is sparing no time in getting his affairs in order, if you know what I mean. Yeah, sorry, that was pretty bad. July 4th, Independence Day. Huge day in the United States, of course. I was fortunate enough to spend a summer in America as part of uni and was in LA for July 4th. It was a fantastic day, and of course, the irony of a Brit attending July 4th celebrations wasn't lost on anyone. The only thing I will say is the fireworks were kind of underwhelming. I was expecting a sort of extravaganza of light and wonder, but they were pretty short and not particularly spectacular in any way, shape, or form. Like, I live in a really small town in Devon, southwest coast of England. Look it up, it's very picturesque. And the displays there, like, literally shit all over the ones in LA. When I asked my friend, hey, what's up with the tiny display? She said loads of fireworks are illegal in America, depending on the state that you're in. I was like, okay, so you can buy a gun and ammo, but not good fireworks. What the fuck? Anyway, it was still a really good day. But why is 4th of July 2018 significant here? This is the first time NK went to Watts' house, allegedly. I'm going to throw quite a few allegedlys about, as the information is from his and her interviews, and so there's likely to be a fair bit of BS flying around. In this case, I think this probably was the first visit, seeing as Shanann only left for North Carolina the week prior. So NK initially tells the Frederick police she had only been to his house once on the second weekend of July. However, in her second interview, she decides, no, I've actually been there twice. First on July 4th, then again on July 14th. But that both times were really, really brief. She goes on to say the first time she went to help out with his fitness app and goes off on a really long, weird tangent about how into fitness she is and how he really appreciated her helping him, which feels just really inappropriate given that the interview takes place after the discovery of Shanann's body and during the time Watts' daughters are being removed from the oil tanks that he shoved them in. And this is not the only time she does this. Oh no, NK loves a good rant about her meticulous fitness regime and clean living lifestyle to anyone that will listen. Love, no one fucking cares. The sole purpose of you being interviewed is to help figure out why this terrible crime has taken place. Anyway, that's NK's account, but let's rewind to the start of that day. Chris wakes up bright and early at NK's apartment and is set to spend the day with her. He checks his phone and finds a load of missed calls and angry texts from Shanann. He's in the shit. From the discovery, I can't see much phone activity between Shanann and Chris between her leaving for North Carolina and July 4th, and so I'm sure the general tone of the call is, "What the fuck have you been doing?" Chris decides he needs to go home immediately and tells NK, who's in the shower, that he's off. Chris shoots off home and begins a deep clean of the house. Right, okay. Maybe this is a way for him to decompress. Apparently, it's reported that he's fairly OCD and the Watts house was always spotless and meticulously tidy. Or maybe he needs to report back to Shanann about what the hell he's been up to. Or maybe he just wants to get into her good books. For whatever reason, he starts shampooing the carpets. Shortly after he gets back, who should rock up? NK. Shocking. Clearly, she's feeling pretty insecure about Shanann calling and Chris immediately going home. Chris says during his second confession in February to CBI and FBI that this solidified the fact to NK that she was always playing second fiddle to his wife and kids. Now, doesn't that just sound completely mental, considering that they only started talking a couple of months ago? I think this is very telling of NK's personality. Girl, you hungry? During her interviews, NK says she went round to help him set up the fitness app, as we've discussed. But I'm pretty sure her real intention was to make sure she was still dominating his thoughts. Anyway, she apparently helps him with the app, has some lunch, and then leaves for a Rockies game and tells Chris to come to hers later that evening, which, of course, he does, like the faithful dog he is. July 6th, NK and Chris go on their first date in the real world and watch a movie. The same day, a family friend, Josh Rosenberg, texts Chris to ask how Bachelor life is going. Oh, if he only knew. Chris responds to say it's going really fast because he's just working out and putting in extra weekend shifts. Yeah, okay, Chris, the only extra shifts you're putting in are with your mistress. July 7th, NK and Chris grab a bite to eat at the Crushed Red restaurant. July 8th, after ignoring a ton of calls from Shanann, Chris texts her to say he fell asleep. Okay, I swear that's the last Friends reference I'm going to do for this episode anyway. So he fell asleep as soon as he got home because the heat was killing him and he loves her so much. July 9th, Nutgate. So, to those of you familiar with this case, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For everyone else, here's a brief summary to help you out. Whilst in North Carolina, Shanann took the girls to go and stay with Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts. Now, Cindy and Shanann do not get on, and they never have. Cindy, by all accounts, had some serious beef with Shanann as she believes she took her precious son and whisked him away from North Carolina to live in Colorado to drive a wedge between them. That's right, people. We have a clear case of mama's boy here. So from day one, Cindy has made snippy comments and been generally really unpleasant towards Shanann. And so their relationship was strained, to say the least. Anyway, before Shanann arrived in North Carolina, she sent lists to both her parents and Chris's, detailing all the foods that Cece couldn't eat, namely tree nuts, as she was highly allergic. So much so that Shanann had to take an EpiPen wherever they went in case she accidentally ate something containing nuts. She asked both sets of grandparents to make sure nothing on the list was in their houses. Fair enough, right? I would do the same thing. Well, she arrives at the Wattses and Cindy has an ice cream there containing nuts, which Shanann, being the ever-vigilant mama, spots in a heartbeat. She's pretty pissed and tells Cindy to put this away and not to give it to the other children until Cece went to bed, as she wouldn't understand why she wasn't allowed any. So at that time, Chris's sister's kids were also around, and one of them went to the freezer and retrieved the offending ice cream and started to munch it down in front of Cece. A huge argument erupts between Cindy and Shanann. Harsh words are exchanged, threats are thrown, and it ends with Shanann storming out, Cece and Bella in tow, screaming that they'll never see them again and accusing Cindy of trying to kill her daughter. Shanann calls her dad to pick her up, and whilst waiting, she takes to Facebook to vent her anger against her mother-in-law. So it wouldn't be my first move, but this is where Shanann finds solace and has a community of supporters. and it's not like she's got much of that going on anywhere else. Shanann later calls and texts Chris a bunch of times with strict instructions on how to deal with the situation with his mum. Now, how Shanann handled this event and subsequently dealt with Chris had a big impact on him. He starts actively ignoring all her calls and will only speak with her for the most part over text. He hated the way that she reacted and the way she spoke to his parents. Did he confront her on this? Fuck no. He bottled it up inside, as he always did. Cowardly Chris just kept repeating that he would make things right and to leave it with him. In my opinion, Nutgate set in motion the dark feelings of hate towards Shanann that, over time, grew and grew inside of Watts and led him down the path of murdering his wife and 2 children. I think these feelings were most likely brewing in the background for some time, that he either wasn't conscious of them yet or that he pushed them back and put them in a box in his mind and just moved on. This also pushed him further into the arms of NK, as in his mind, she would never ever act like that. Do I think Shanann reacted well? Well, no, not really. But in the context of having to deal with Cindy's bitchiness towards her over the years, as well as being pregnant, riding that hormone train, I totally get it. Unfortunately, I think this sparked a series of events that was ultimately the beginning of the end. I should also say that during this whole time, whilst all of this is going on, NK and Chris are exchanging nude selfies with one another like horny teenagers. Chris downloads a secret calculator app to store his treasure trove of nudie pics to ensure that Shanann doesn't find them. July 14th, NK's second visit to the Watts' home, and the 2 take a day trip to Boulder to visit a Mustang museum. During her second, that we know of, visit to his house, she takes a tour of the house and sees all the photos of his wife and kids and remembers thinking to herself, wow, she's really beautiful. These are her words, by the way. Takes a step back and thinks he has this beautiful house and family. Why would he want to give this all up? In her version, NK turns to Chris and asks whether there's still hope for his marriage and that she was pushing him to save his marriage, but that he said that there was no hope. So that's NK's version of July 14th. Chris has a very different tale to tell. In his initial confession in February, he claims that NK only went to his house once on July 4th. However, in his letters to Cherlyn, Chris tells how NK freaked out when he told her that he and Shanann were trying to have a baby before they started seeing each other. She stormed out of the house to sit in her truck. They text back and forth for around 30 minutes, and he's able to get her to come back inside by telling her he didn't want to have another baby with Shanann. So, tricky one, seeing that she is currently pregnant. NK tells Chris that she got mad as she wanted first with him and wanted to give him his first son. They left for NK's apartment where a night of passionate lovemaking was on the cards. But Chris's anatomy had other plans. Something about this argument hit Chris like a ton of bricks. NK wanted first with him, but this could never happen. Or could it? From that day onwards, NK reports that their sex became much more infrequent. Apparently, they were doing it 3 to 4 times a day, people. Seriously. Who the fuck has time for that? This apparently went down to 1 or 2 times a day because Chris was finding it difficult to perform, if you know what I mean. In my opinion, July 14th was another big turning point for Chris Watts, further cementing the thoughts in his head that for him to continue with NK, he had to get rid of his family. I think it was around this time he started to plan how this would happen. You would think this weighed pretty heavily on his head. You know, planning to wipe out your family is probably quite preoccupying, and so I imagine this impacted on his sexual drive. July 15th, the day of Cece's birthday party in North Carolina. Shanann was still at war with Chris's parents, and although she hadn't expressly uninvited them, she did post to Facebook about the dangers of allergies and captioned it with some pretty emotive language. Again, a lot of us probably would have dealt with this differently, but you know, this was her venting platform of choice and how she chose to express herself. If they didn't like it, they could have just blocked her, which I think they did actually. Anyway, Cindy and Ronnie see this and feel that it's directed at them, which it clearly is, and don't attend Cece's birthday. So playing devil's advocate here for a minute, I think that was probably a good call given the tension between them and Shanann. The atmosphere would have been pretty bloody sour, to say the least, and it would have taken away from Cece's day. July 21st, Watts and NK go to Bandamere Speedway and the Rooftop Tavern in Morrison for another one of their romantic car-themed day outings. Watts must have been absolutely lapping this up and thinking, my wife never goes to car museums or racing tracks with me. but this girl loves it and totally gets me. No, Chris, I think NK is giving you exactly what you want to reel you in and tear your family apart. I'm pretty certain this kind of treatment had an expiration date, but he was so short-sighted about the whole thing. All he could see was a hot girl that loves cars and shagging all the time. In his mind, this would have always been their relationship for all time. Idiot. I should also say that during this time, Chris had effectively completely stopped talking to Shanann over the phone and only communicated her over the odd text, if she was lucky. Whereas NK was getting a flurry of calls, texts, and photos of flowers Watts would find on his days out in the field at work. How lovely. July 24th. NK's web history search reveals she Googled, "Man I am having an affair with will leave his wife." Do we need more confirmation that NK did not believe they were still married? I think not. As NK and Chris's relationship intensifies, Shanann smells a rat and starts to communicate her concerns with Chris. During one text conversation, she flat out accuses him of being with another girl. She goes on to say that she has realized the relationship is only one-way emotions and that he gives nothing back. In a half-assed attempt to smooth things over, Watts apologizes and says he loves her. This is, of course, not good enough for Shanann, and she explodes that he has been living the bachelor life while she's working, looking after 2 young children and carrying their third, which he has shown no interest in whatsoever or even bothered to ask her how the pregnancy is going. Right on, sister, that guy's such a wang. During this time, Watts is searching the internet for Victoria's Secrets. I'm going to hazard a guess that this wasn't to buy Shanann a present to make up for being such a shitty husband. July 25th. For 3 long, strange hours, Watts researches the following terms: when to say I love you, when to say I love you for the first time in a new relationship, and how does it feel when someone says I love you. Further confirmation, the guy's a fucking robot. How he got as far as he did in life without anyone being like, hey, this guy's kind of strange and void of basic human emotion and expression is baffling. I guess he just passed it off as being laid back, but sadly something much more sinister was going on in that strange head of his. Later that afternoon, NK tries to call Chris when he's on the phone to Shanann and leaves him a voicemail saying she misses his face, then giggles in a really haunting way, like in the movies when there's a little girl ghost with unfinished business. Freaky. In the discovery documents, the detective undertaking the review of the phone data describes her laugh as an eerily disconcerting childlike giggle, which I thought was absolutely amazing. July 28th. NK and Watts spend the night together at the Great Sand Dunes and camp at Zapata Falls. NK, in her later telephone interview with the detectives, is able to recount a huge amount of detail about this trip. Apparently the weather was terrible. She taught Chris how to light a fire because he'd never done that before. They stopped at a place called the Oasis to rent sandboards and buy ice and firewood, which Chris paid for on one of his infamous Anadarko gift cards so not to be detected by Shanann, who controlled their finances. So it's funny that she's able to recall so much specific detail about this trip. As we will see in a later episode, she really struggles with remembering some very important details when asked by detectives, most notably the 111-minute call on the night of the murders, when she cannot remember a single thing about what they talked about. Those of you familiar with this case may have seen there's quite a bit of media released on this trip. Loads of photos and a few videos of NK sandboarding and a vomit-inducing one where she talks to camera to tell Chris what a fantastic time she's having and how much he means to her. In the discovery documents, there is a reference to a short video that Watts shoots of the campsite where the song Forever Girl is playing in the background, which is just too corny for words and is straight out of a lame-o teen flick. NK and Watts returned to the real world on July 29th. Watts told Shanann that he went on a solo camping and hiking trip and sent her the odd text, largely ignoring all her calls and messages, as per usual. That evening, Shanann texts Watts to say she hasn't spoken to him in 48 hours and she's had a really hard weekend, if he cares. Watts responds with his usual BS that he'll make it up to her and he's really sorry. He's such a coward. He tells her he's really tired, which, let me just say, is not the type of thing you want to say to a pregnant woman looking after 2 children under 5. She's not having any of it and accuses him of showing no interest in her, the kids, or the baby. She ends the text by saying, "You're out of it from playing." Now, I'm not too au fait with American lingo, but it sounds like that's a reference to him having an affair. July 31st. Chris flies to North Carolina. At 3 a.m, Watts takes a photo of the parking signs at the airport and sends them to Shanann. He then calls her just before 5 a.m. to say he's on the plane. They hold a brief telephone call, Then Shanann texts him to have a massive go at him for his decision to park at the airport due to the extortionate parking rates. To be fair, my husband would have done the exact same thing, except in that scenario, I'd be the one parking at the airport and he would be the one having a go at me. He always makes us look for the cheap parking, which is outside of the airport, like usually when you rent someone's driveway and then we have to walk a mile or 2 miles to the airport with all our luggage in tow, which is just a pain in the fucking ass. Watts arrives in North Carolina and is greeted by Cece and Bella running up to him to give him a hug. There's a video of this and he really doesn't look very happy to see anyone. Also, when the girls run up to him, it looks like they set off an alarm and Chris ushers them out of the area and they have the cutest little looks on their faces of worry that they have done something wrong, which is just so heartbreaking. They were such lovely natured children with beautiful spirits and it's all just so unimaginable, really. Anyway, let's put the brakes on there until next episode when we'll take a look at the unmitigated disaster that was the Watts' family vacay to North Carolina. Thanks for listening, guys. If you like this podcast, please do follow me on Instagram at NoCommentPod, where I'll be posting the highlights relevant to this episode and other bits related to the cases I cover. I also have a Patreon page, which I'll link in the description. I do this pod all on my lonesome, so any help would be greatly appreciated and will go towards making the content that much better. I am in the process of creating some exclusive bits for Patreon users, so stay tuned for that. Until next time.